I was in Lancaster, California, and I was there trying to get some deodorant, and I went into the aisle and saw that it was all behind locked shelves, and I had to get a store employee to come unlock it, put it into another locked box so that I could take it to the front and then pay. And I quickly determined I would never live in a place that had a locked up deodorant. And so I started to think about what would it look like if I were to move somewhere? Where would my utopia be? Now, I've got a young family, I've got 3 kids under 10, relatively active, and so this is going to be a list associated with mine, but it's going to look at a 2-phase approach: research and then boots on the ground, and things that I've talked with both clients that have moved and relocated to Fort Collins, Northern Colorado about, as well as some things that maybe are particular to me, because each person's utopia is definitely going to be unique. So take what I say with a grain of salt, but this is my finding utopia. What's up, everybody? My name is Patrick Soukup, and this is the Living in Fort Collins, which is my utopia, Colorado YouTube channel. Now, we are licensed agents in the state of Colorado, so if you are considering relocating to the area, give my team and I a call, text, or email. We have helped hundreds of families across Fort Collins, Colorado, the United States, and country move and relocate to the area. So if you are relocating, buying, selling, or investing in the area, give my team and I a call, text, or email. Without any further delay, let's jump into today's video, Finding Utopia, the best place to live, for me at least. Okay, again, we are going to look at a 2-phase approach. A lot of things that you can do today, and also, seriously, watching these videos about different areas, because I'm sure if you're watching this video, you might have seen other videos in different areas that are similar to this. So hopefully you are doing a significant amount of research. But here are some different things that I would look at before then scheduling a trip and going and exploring. So phase 1 is going to be research, and phase 2 is going to be boots on the ground. Phase 1, you're gonna have this funnel. You're gonna have this kind of tons of different properties, and you're gonna kind of figure out what your utopia means. So here we go. 1 is, are there any power outages? Are you gonna move to an area and you're gonna risk freezing in the winter because maybe the infrastructure isn't set up? Number 2, how is their cell phone and internet broadband type of capabilities? Do they have blackouts everywhere? How is their service? What type of internet providers are there? Because we live in a digital age, and needing able to produce work, conduct work on a daily basis, whether that be on your phone or computer, is an absolute necessity. What about serious weather events? Now, this one's not, I don't say unique to me by any means, but I would say I get rather anxious. We own rental properties across Northern Colorado, and when I see a big snowstorm or the weather dipping down below, or thunder or hail or any type of serious weather event, I get relatively stressed out. So I would want to find an area that has relatively low risk for hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, fires. Those would be things that I would want to know anecdotally. How risky is it? Because even in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado, we had a tornado in Windsor in 2008, and that was the only time in my 36 years in Northern Colorado that I've seen that. So it's not impossible, but maybe just relatively infrequently, once every 40 years or so. All right, well, what about the crime? I do have a young family. I wanna make sure where I'm moving is safe. That is hugely important to me. Violent crime and property crime are probably gonna be the 2 highest, really seriously looked at types of crime that I look at. From there, the rest kind of are on a tiered scale from there, but I would say violent and property crime. Cost of living. Can I afford where I'm going? I feel like, yes, Fort Collins has gotten a lot more expensive than where it used to be, but would I wanna move to a place like Orange County, where we know that there's $19 million houses and $7 million houses, and you're lucky if you can live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath for under $1 million in the Silicon Valley area? We had clients move who said we were looking at basically 1,200 square foot, $1.25 million houses, and had no desire to be in there. So cost of living, in addition to property taxes, rent versus owning, groceries, gas. These are all things that you want to take a look at high level and make sure that it fits your budget and also income levels. School ratings. I think this is tough to understand in the sense of where all the school ratings come from, but I would say in comparison to other schools in the state, how does that area's school rating perform? And especially moving from a place like Fort Collins, if I were to move out, the Poudre School District ranks very well. I'm very comfortable sending my kids there. I would have to feel at least as comfortable, if not more comfortable, with the school system and specific school that I would be going to. Is there high unemployment there? And also, what is the population doing? Is it increasing or decreasing? Is it an area that people want to move to? The economic base, where are the employers and what are people doing? Because ultimately, if you're moving to a place, you are potentially going to be buying there, and you want to make sure that the baseline economics are supportive for an investment of potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not $1 million+ in a new home. Now this one's, I'm a little bit young for this, but still I'm getting more and more focused on my personal health. And one thing that I've taken for granted is how much healthcare options and availability are in Northern Colorado. And that's not necessarily the case anywhere. But that being said, it takes one rare circumstance or event, or we've had friends whose 3-year-old, 4-year-old gets diabetes and it's very scary. We want to make sure that where we're moving, that there is healthcare relatively available, close and nearby, and at a point that, is good for our, lifestyles. We've worked with a lot of clients who have specific doctor's appointments and specific types of doctors that they have to go and see on either a monthly basis or every other week type of deal. And while Fort Collins or Northern Colorado might not necessarily have it, Denver does have a lot of those as well. So our medical here is quite phenomenal. But if I were to leave, I would want to make sure, especially now that I'm growing a little bit older, having a little bit less hair, a little bit more grays and whites than I do red, I need to make sure that for the long term, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, my wife and I are in a good position to be taken care of if in the event we needed it. Now these next ones, I'm actually gonna look at a list because one of my good friends, who is probably the most analytical move I have ever seen in our 5+ years of running this YouTube channel, and he had an NCAA bracket. I've talked about him before, but he gave me some insights about what they also look like. So I wanted to add those in here as well. Type of town, like do you want a city, suburb, college, or rural type of town? Percent of college degrees. Is this an educated area? Is this something that, or is it something that you understand going to it, maybe not as many college degrees, something to consider. Convenience to a major airport, and where, if you're not moving to a major metro, where is the nearest metro so that you can go and you can see plays, museums, professional sports teams, all of that at least somewhat nearby. This was a super interesting one because the way that he put it made a lot of sense. What are the winter daily highs and the summer daily lows? And that ruled out some places like Wisconsin versus Fort Collins, and then as well as on the summer side of things was kind of a moot point for Fort Collins at least. But I thought that was really interesting because like a friend of ours who moved from Dallas, he was considering kind of the Wisconsin area, and he said, I'm not moving to an area where I'm gonna be freezing for 4 months of the year. If I'm at least gonna be moving to a place, I wanna see some sun, which also is one of the criteria to look at is sunny days, which actually ruled out areas like Portland, Seattle, and Pittsburgh. And so that's where Fort Collins, it does well. And these are things that I thought are really worth researching, especially if you're considering making such a large move. And not to get into anything politics-wise, but I would say the area that you're moving, you might wanna make sure that they somewhat align with what your political beliefs are. In this day and age, it seems like it's relatively high energy, high emotion, and I would say in Fort Collins, at least the group that we hang around, everyone seems to respect each other's opinions and beliefs and can have a good conversation, but I wouldn't say that's so everywhere. And that would be more anecdotal than anything, but the voting history of the county would be something that you could research. And if that is something that's very important to you, considering upon that phase 1 research. So there we have it, phase 1, you sit at your computer, you go deep. You could probably use AI for some of this research. You could use YouTube channels like ours or others. You could do Google. There's so many different ways to research this, but really building a spreadsheet and determining what are your priorities versus other. But those are things on a phase 1. If I were to consider moving to a new Utopia, would I want to look at? And now phase 2 is and kind of the crux of this, because I had traveled to a few different areas and I was like, there's no way I would move here because of X. And so this is kind of more of the boots on the ground. You can do all of your research, you can make sure that it's an area that you want to move to, and that is all great and well, but I think getting in the area and driving around the area, whether it be with a real estate agent like ourselves, we would be happy to take you through kind of a city tour, especially if you're strongly considering moving here, relocating to the area. We'd love to take you through our town, kind of show you the routes, the different areas, and then yourself, spending some time, whether that be in an Airbnb down where you would want to be living or specific areas of town, but getting in the area and exploring it. And so here on phase 2 are some of the things that I would absolutely want and some of the things that I would absolutely not stand for or move to the area. Here we go. So we will start with, yes, the no deodorant being locked up behind a counter or behind windows. I think that tells me enough about maybe all of these major retailers will be moving that way because of theft or whatever that might be. But it tells me enough about the area that there's enough shoplifting where maybe the underlying character of the area is not what I want to be a part of. And again, maybe that's something that all these major retailers are going to be doing, but I don't see it in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado. And if I did, I'd be like, well, shoot, that's, I guess I'm moving. And additionally, I guess there's also places like Las Vegas where they have energy drinks locked up. So maybe the overall would be having retail goods locked up that maybe shouldn't be locked up, like diapers. And then kind of moving forward with this is, again, property related. Very minimal, if not no, bars on windows and fences with spikes on their fence posts sticking out. Again, maybe not none, because maybe there's different areas and types of retailers and all that kind of stuff, or houses, but at least you're not driving and everywhere's windows are boarded up or barred up and there's fences, keeping people out. I would say that would be a boots on the ground. I would at least raise questions of why is this happening? Can you help me understand why this is guardrailed up? And there hopefully is a decent answer for that. Graffiti and vandalism on buildings. If I'm driving around and there's just a ton of graffiti and vandalism, again, I would say that gets to a little bit of a safety deal. And I'm just wondering, and the cost of upkeep and how the city maintains it. Would be interested to see why that is happening or so prevalent. If it were something that was sticking out like a sore thumb, that would be a relatively big red flag for me. So you can search the homeless rates, but I would say also, hopefully if you're driving around with somebody who's very familiar with the area, you can ask them about, the homeless and homeless encampments and maybe where they congregate and what it looks like, so you can see, is this like a tent city, or is it something to where, yes, there are some homeless people living in this area, but it isn't something that's overwhelming. And I would also then subsequently ask, how is the area dealing with homeless? Are there non-for-profits that are involved? Is it police that are purely dealing with it? How are police dealing with it? Is there funding for it? These are all really important things to look at and consider. Now for me, when I went to Los Angeles and I was driving into Disney World, I just am looking from afar and I'm seeing an area full of smog. And I would say Fort Collins actually does not have the best air quality, which is super interesting because it's like clean, crisp mountain air. But the reality is our air quality doesn't perform super well on a scale for whatever reason. It could be the Weld County with their oil and gas, and because we're such a drive-heavy community. But regardless, it's not very visual. There are, when there's wildfires and things of that nature, maybe some of that Canadian fire and smoke comes down, and Montana smoke and California smoke finds its way to the Front Range Valley and kind of sits there for a little bit. So maybe a little smoky and things of that nature, but not necessarily on a daily basis, like when I was driving through Los Angeles and I just am looking around like, you can't even see anything. It's so smoggy and air pollution. I was like, why would anyone want to live here? But clearly, one of the most populated cities in the world, plenty of people do and are okay with it. But for me, I would probably be a relatively big no-no of at least visual smog on a day-to-day basis. How are the conditions of the streets and sidewalks? I would say that's how is the city maintaining these extremely vital infrastructure pieces in their community. I was driving in Brighton, Colorado, and I was driving through it, and I was like, man, I'm glad I don't necessarily have a YouTube channel pitching Brighton. That would be hard because as you're driving into Brighton, there are potholes all over the place, and it was just like, you do have to avoid them. Otherwise your car is going to be ruined. And then the same goes with heaving sidewalks and sidewalk repairs. And are these ADA compliant, or are they very narrow? And some, of course, especially in our downtown, old town areas, there's some renovation and rebuilding of sidewalks, but there's going to be some small ones too. Overall, how is it? Is it ever present? Is it the only thing that you see, or is there new sidewalk? How are they? What's the width like, and how are they maintained? Now this one again kind of gets down to safety, property crime, and things of that nature, and potentially could be just more focused on major metros. And again, I will say, my perspective is I am born and raised here in Fort Collins, Colorado. I have lived in Loveland for 9 months, but otherwise my entire life I've lived in Fort Collins. So I do have a relatively minimal view on life. So when I say this, you might be like, bro, like that is literally every major metro, and that's okay. But what I'm going to say is essentially, if the school has metal detectors, essentially the high schools have metal detectors, I wouldn't love my kids going to a high school that the school feels like they need metal detectors. So if that was the case, probably be a hard pass, hard no for me. Now here's an interesting one, and again, I love living in Fort Collins, and this is one of the things that's very unique is our curbs, gutters, and medians are very well maintained. You'll find some in the county that maybe is a little bit overgrown, but even the county is pretty clean as far as our medians go. But with medians within Fort Collins proper, trees, bushes, mulch, sprinklered, beautiful. Curbs, gutters, sidewalks, streets within Fort Collins. There are significant sales tax dollars that go to the maintenance and upkeep of all of these different areas. We have a tree planting program. I think it's more than 50 some odd thousand trees that is our assets in Fort Collins. So very well maintained community, especially within the public eye. But that would be something that I would go for. And when I was in Des Moines, Iowa, I'm just looking at this. I'm like, really? It's just, I mean, it just wasn't super pretty. Can you understand the city when you're there? Again, this is where driving around with somebody would be helpful, because if you're driving around yourself, like we were in Fort Worth, Texas, and I was driving around and I'm like, I don't know where I am. I mean, I'm looking at a map and I'm like, we could be in the boondocks for all I know, but we were actually relatively close to some convenience and commercial and things of that nature. But I just didn't know the area very well. And that would be where I would want to know from somebody's local, knows the area. How is the layout of the area? How's the city planning? All of the zoning and the development review? Like, how intentional, or is this just kind of a free-for-all, build where you want, do what you want to do, and you can see it now, it's been there for 50 years, that there's an office next to industrial, next to a house, that it wasn't very well planned out. And while that would probably be a little bit lower priority for me, it's not a no priority. And so it would be something that I would take into consideration. Now, my wife would argue with me on this one, but when I stepped off the plane, is there heavy humidity? Can I wear pants? Can I wear a t-shirt without sweating through it as soon as I get out of the shower? For me, I am probably not moving to a place that has heavy humidity. My wife loves it. And I would say on top of that, understanding how your body reacts to a dry climate versus heavy humidity, I think is pretty important. But for me, heavy humidity would be a no-go. Take your kids, go to the park, walk around natural areas. How well are they maintained? Are there natural areas? Are there community parks? And if so, how are the assets on there? Are they falling apart? Is it dangerous? Are they shut down? I would say that also shows where the cities and communities' focus and priorities are, whether it be on building a beautiful community and city for its residents or somewhere else. And it's not that, again, my specific requirements should match anybody's. That's just something that I would do if I was going and exploring an area. And a couple of others from my buddy who, again, have the spreadsheet amongst spreadsheets. But I would ask myself, what activities are there to do? What local activities are there to do? What libraries, zoos, museums? Does it align with some of my lifestyle choices? And what would it mean for me if I moved there? Are, breweries, if that's your jam, downtown distilleries, is there plays, musical theaters? Is there professional sports teams? All of these different things. What activities are there to do, and does it align with what you want to do as a person? Finally, is Costco or Trader Joe's anywhere near? I thought that was super interesting, but it also talks to you about the size of the area, size of the general region. If those two are there, it's probably big enough for me, and as well as just having the amenities at least somewhat nearby. So I'd want to know how close the nearest Costco or Trader Joe's is. I thought that was a really good one for my buddy as well. So the two-phase approach to finding at least my utopia. I don't know necessarily if that matches yours, but those are things to take into consideration when determining whether a city or an area, community, suburb, college, rural, whatever is for you. Phase 1, do your research, get your spreadsheets lined out, your priorities set, and how do they stack up from each other. Maybe 5 to 10 areas from there. Get your boots on the ground and determine, does it match up with my research? And does it match up with the vibe and the desire for me, my family, my partner, whoever, or just myself if I'm considering moving to the area? Now, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, comment below where you're considering moving, and if it is Fort Collins or Northern Colorado, give my team and I a call, text, or email. Until next time, consider subscribing, because about 75% of you who are watching this are not subscribers, and that's okay. It is a vanity metric, but it does feel good every now and again to get that subscriber. So thank you for subscribing if you are. Otherwise, until next time, take care.